transformative prison work. We have about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes for that conversation. And then after that, we have a funders sandbox, which is a great time to showcase something that you're working on, something that you want to share, a plug for an event, a plug for a funding strategy, et cetera. So we hope that you'll stick around for that. And we'll also be talking about the California Criminal Justice Funders Group's upcoming meetings and webinars as well. So you'll get some more information about what we're doing in the future too. So how about if we do just a quick round, and I'll pass it to my friend Amanda.
I am a site guard program, and we are a reconnection to nature program in 8 prisons.
Yes, Howard Oringer. I'm at the Omnia Foundation. Some of you know that, and also a participant in the RGHR group at the Women's Fund.
I'm Jan Oringer, ditto.
I'm Zoe Redman, and I work here at NCG actually and do member engagement and social media and stuff.
Great.
Hi everyone, I'm Monique Mehta. I am a consultant and I help coordinate this group, the California Criminal Justice Funders Group.
I'm Sohrab Nabatian at Calliopeia Foundation. You don't have to spell it. And I will be telling you more in a minute.
I'm Karina Montag. I am the programs director and clinical supervisor at Insight Prison Project.
And I am Phil. I am a returning citizen as of almost a month home now. And I am the restorative reentry fellow at Insight Prison Project.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Jacques Verdun. I'm the director of the Inside Out nonprofit.
Sonia Ferrer.
Previous member of Threshold, but no longer with them, but I am with Jan and Howard on
Race,
gender, and human rights.
It's a mouthful.
I'm Patty Quillen, and I'm also with the RGHR group.
Hey, Laura Levati, Common Council Foundation, and we have a number of different funds and foundations that we advise, some of which fund systemic criminal justice reform in California and some across the country.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison McGee, I'm the Executive Director of the Zellerback Family Foundation here in San Francisco.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robert Joseph. I'm a Senior Program Officer with Tipping Point Community. We're a community foundation based here in San Francisco. We're newer to the criminal justice reform effort. We have worked in the reentry space, particularly around direct service, but we're now moving into kind of systems change, and we'll probably focus on San Francisco first.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Punumbayan. I'm the Director of Equity and Social Justice here at Northern California Grainmakers, and I just want to welcome all of you to our space and also share the wonderful news that NCG is now the fiscal sponsor for California Criminal Justice Funders Group. So we're very excited about this partnership, and one thing you can expect from us hopefully soon is a webpage for California Criminal Justice Funders. So stay tuned. And we look forward to partnering more with all of you very soon.
Yeah, Karen, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Karen. I am helping Monique with the Criminal Justice Funders Group and their administrative work. And I'm also part of the Transformative Prison Work Group, helping them do the same administrative help.
Me? Oh, and Josh.
Hey, yeah, sorry I'm late. My name is Josh Weezy. I work with Virgin's Nonprofit Foundation, specifically on criminal justice reform.
We have a speaker also.
Would you like to introduce yourself as well? Welcome.
My name is Emiliano. I'm formerly incarcerated, and I am currently a member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I also work with Jacques with Inside Out, and go back to the institutions to co-facilitate the GRIP program.
Great, welcome. Thanks, Emiliano. So before we dive in, I just wanted to say, express gratitude to NCG. We are super excited to partner with NCG. The California Criminal Justice Group formed in 2014 when we really recognized that there were more funders interested in criminal justice, working in criminal justice, so we could be in a collaborative learning community with each other. And so we've been meeting since then about twice a year in person. We've had webinars and virtual sessions such as this one. And we've been growing and building, and the time has come where we get to another level. So coming to NCG is really terrific. We'll be able to reach a broader set of funders and donors, both through Northern California Grantmakers, but also through Philanthropy California, which is the umbrella for Northern California Grantmakers, Southern California Grantmakers, and San Diego Grantmakers. So hopefully we'll be able to reach and touch more funders who may be new to this issue or working on it from a variety of perspectives and not even call themselves criminal justice funders yet. So that's really exciting. And I also wanted to just have a plug, since Josh is in the room with Virgin Unite, that I think there's a lot of opportunity to talk with our corporate partners who are interested in working in this space as well, and really think about how private philanthropy, community-based philanthropy, and corporate philanthropy could dovetail around this issue area. So that's also really exciting as well. So great, I'm gonna turn it over to Saurabh, and I know we're gonna have a really informative and interesting session.
Okay. So where do I look for the camera? Right up there? Okay. Hi. So first of all, just thank you all so much for being here. It's been really wonderful to be here with some really beloved colleagues and to share some of this work, especially folks joining remotely as well. My name is Saurabh, like I said. I'm a program officer at Calliope Foundation. We're based in the North Bay in San Rafael. And I'm just really thrilled to be here with a wonderful panel and as well Emiliano from LA to introduce some of you and kind of update others on a field of work that will be an update and some perhaps. Let me begin by giving a little context. So what do we mean by transformative prison work? Kind of a big title, and it's in a very early stage of emergence as a field. A lot of nonprofits have been doing really excellent work, but kind of in isolation for a long time. And what's happening now is folks are beginning to get together, kind of see and own the value of this work, and work more as a coalition, advocating and coordinating, etc. The essence of it is really just brilliant, and from my point of view, quite brilliant trauma-informed methodologies that provide tools and communities of transformation for incarcerated men and women to overcome self-destructive patterns, to work constructively with their own trauma and suffering. It's very rare and really quite sophisticated. And I like the word transformative because it's really transformative in nature as opposed to transactional, in that it puts the transformation of trauma and suffering really at the center. That's not to say that other types of programs aren't transformative in their own right, but what distinguishes what has drawn folks together here is that it efficiently and directly works to put trauma at the center and to uncover unhealthy patterns that lead to violence, transform those patterns and turn that suffering into healing, but not only that, into leadership, so that folks can go forward and bring, contribute to their communities, whether they're still in prison or when they're returning. There are many different ways of doing this. It's not like this is a monolithic technique, but I'd say most of them revolve around this sort of trauma-informed restorative practice. And they're, again, I keep using the word brilliant. It kept coming up when I was writing notes. They're brilliantly customized for the prison environment, which is a really just awful place to work. Bless you all. In the sense that it's punitive, it's hard-hearted, and there's many barriers set up against doing anything constructive. Right. And you'll hear more about that. But we, Calliope, that is, attempted to highlight some of these methodologies in a prison and in a website, called beyondprison.us. I put little cards around. Monique, would you mind putting in beyondprison.us? I'd love for folks to see that in the chat box. Put the link in there. Which just tells a story and helps to learn more about, what this kind of work is. And I want to just make a plug and tell you that, on a personal level, both Inside Down and Insight Prison Project have been so gracious, and Insight Garden as well, where Amanda is representing, in letting me come in and sit in some of these circles. And it's extraordinarily powerful. For me, it's like it's not only spiritually grounding, but it's professionally grounding to see this human side of what we're calling criminal justice reform. This is really human beings dealing with dark realities and trying to make the best of what they can. Extremely inspiring. So just a plug on behalf of them. I didn't ask them this, but they've been so gracious up till now. I'm sure they'll be going forward. If anyone has a chance to visit San Quentin is an amazing experiment, social experiment that I'm not sure exists anywhere in the world, really. I don't know, in terms of the amount of experimentation and good stuff happening in there. So what I hope we can show today is the way that this work, first of all, what this work is, but also the way that this work connects to wider criminal justice reform. I think there's a tendency among funders to look at policies in terms of reducing the prison population, passing really important legislation so that people who shouldn't really be in prison can get out. The thing that I think this work addresses quite crucially is if people are going before the parole boards, if people are returning to their societies, and they've been in these really dehumanizing environments where whatever social skills they had might be just denigrated, and they certainly probably didn't pick up a lot of new constructive social skills, are coming back to society en masse as a result of the success of criminal justice reform. What does that mean, and how can we be supporting these people in having the tools for self-awareness, for empathy, to be able to kind of be working with different patterns of behavior and reaction that might have gotten them in there in the first place, if in fact, that's what happened. So in other words, it really connects to reentry. It really connects to legislation that's bringing more people to the parole board. And it connects to the wider effort of criminal justice reform overall in important ways. Keeping in mind that there's 121,000, something like that. I think that's a little under, incarcerated men and women in California who are living day in, day out with little to no access to tools to actually work on whatever they're dealing with. And as we all know, very often there's a huge amounts of trauma that the correlation of, the amounts of trauma that incarcerated people have is well known, but there's really little to no access or tools to work on that and to, emerge from prison, having more adaptive behaviors than before. So that's where this work shines, and I think it connects to many other aspects of CJ reform. And there's something really exciting happening, which is that there's, California is starting to catch on. Now, maybe I'm overstating it a little bit, but more wardens are beginning to see the value of this work and remove obstacles and barriers that they've been putting to kind of, there's a real hostility almost toward programming. Like, why should we give the prisoners anything when they're no good and all this, right? Which is not logical. But so barriers are lifting, obstructions are kind of evaporating slowly, and at the same time that there's legislative opportunities with Prop 57, SB 261, all these things are creating momentum for folks to begin leaving prison. And the question is, do they have what they need to come back in a way that they can be responsive to their families, that they can be successful, have the inner tools to just the success that we all wish everyone to have. So in closing, Kelly P has been contributing to this kind of work for almost 20 years, which is amazing. I've been there 8. And even in these 8 years, the amount of opportunity that's happening has been so exciting. And so in response, what Kelly P has tried to do is help support some of the leaders of this kind of work, some who are in the room today, to come together instead of working in isolation, in competition, with fundraising on one side and CDCR on the other side. It's been a difficult place to work. To have these groups begin to connect, advocate together, coordinate together, share best practices, et cetera. They've only been formally doing this for about 18 months, but there have been some real successes so far that we're going to share more about. And that's it. We're trying to keep this momentum going. We're trying to expand it. It started with 4 groups. We're now up to 15 participant groups representing all kinds of, the whole state of California and every prison, I think. Yeah. So this is the context, and what we're going to do is have each of the panelists give a brief introduction to themselves and their work. And then we'll have a good long time for discussion and Q&A afterwards. So folks on Zoom, if you have questions as we're talking, please put them in to Monique, and we'll make sure to address them. Sound good? All right. And to begin with, I am thrilled to have Phil Melendez with us today, who has a direct and very fresh perspective on this. So, Phil, would you lead us into it?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I'd like to say is just that how happy I am to hear your intro and that people are coming together to put all of this stuff together, because that's one of the things I really wanted to see when I was in. Because I had a very well-rounded rehabilitation process. It was not just one group in isolation. I mean, it takes a lot, and a lot goes into it. So I guess about myself, I guess I could tell you a little bit about the transformative work by telling you about who I was, about 20 years ago, which was a kid who had a dad that was in and out of prison. And, you talk about trauma, that was a big trauma for me. He was a big influence for me. He denied paternity of me, which left me feeling abandoned, unworthy, unloved, and just incapable of being loved anyhow, anyway. And those were some of the traumas that I was dealing with. I had a mom who had me as a teen, and she was, busy being young and being a teen. And so that left me with another set of trauma. So I adapted a certain way about me to try to fit in with another family, which was my gang family. And, ultimately, one night when my dad was collecting a drug debt, kind of like I can kind of tell you a little bit about who he was. He was collecting a drug debt. I found that to be the most horrible, but also perfect opportunity to like validate myself in his eyes. And I committed my crime. And it was 2 second-degree murders, assault, and I was sentenced to 30 to life plus 11 years. And then I spent about 15 years in higher level prisons without any transformative programming at all. I think they had an AA or something like that, but just it wasn't like the San Quentin social experiment. So I spent a lot of time just trying to survive, and it was rough. And then I get to San Quentin, and then I take a group like GRIP, and I hear a lady talking about the trauma that she incurred by having somebody murdered in her family. And that was the first thing that really opened my eyes to what I had done, right? And that's one of the things that set in motion my focus in my transformative growth, my rehabilitation. Then I get to groups like Vogue, where I have to do a crime impact statement. And I had to really come to terms with my crime and exactly everything that I did, but that was one of the most powerful things to ever hit me. And just from there, just having that weight kind of lifted off, but another one put on, but a different one which gave me purpose. Like those are the things that kept me focused on my rehabilitation, taking all the groups and all the programs that I could to really understand myself, to make sure I'm a better person. And this was, this started before Senate Bill 260. I know you mentioned that this happened before that. And when that finally happened, I finally found that I could possibly put all this transformative work to work for me in front of the parole board. And I went in, so to speak. I took all the groups. I don't know how many certificates I have, but it's quite a few. But yeah, 261, Senate Bill 261, when that bill passed, I told all my family about it. I told them I was pretty much ready. I already know what I got to do. I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna rock it, and I did. There's a lot that goes into rehabilitation though. So one passed, I'm home, and now you also talked about reentry. So now I'm home trying to make a way for myself, but I also want to make a way for everyone who does come home, because you talked about like services not really being there. There's a lot of stuff that comes in prison, that comes out of prison with us, right? And that's just accountability and a drive to do better and be better, to never see today's youth follow in our footsteps. We have a lot of drive for that. There's so many things that we can do. That's why I said I'm just so excited to hear that this type of group is happening, right? Because we need to put it all together. And I think if there's any more questions, I could probably field those later. So there's a lot to talk about, I'm sure.
So just to kind of wrap that up, you're an embodiment of new legislation passing, and thank God you've had opportunities to do the rehabilitation you say you needed, and returning. And now tell us a little bit about your work with IPG.
It's a new position. We had got some of the funding while I was still inside. Our executive director wanted to make a restorative reentry fellowship for guys who come out. It's a 1-year fellowship, giving us some training in nonprofit running, development even, and possibly just management. And what it will do every year, somebody else will get it, and hopefully I can transition to a position within the company or any other nonprofit organization. And then the guy after me, he'll come get the same training. And also too, I've been given some good freedoms. You know, I've done a lot at San Quentin, like I said, and I was heavily in the media center. I was involved with actually some of the lobby people who helped push Senate Bill 261. So I got to connect with a lot of those peoples, and I got to learn how to be an advocate for myself and how to talk to people about transformation, what it needs to be, and what all it entails. And I think our executive director saw that, and she was like, you know what, you need to just come home and do that and do more of that. So hopefully my job, once I complete the fellowship, I'll transition to something like that, and hopefully just organize other opportunities for other guys coming home, and just, like I said, take that reentry part and just expand it and give us all the tools that we need to be successful and complete our goals and complete our passion and purpose that we come out with.
Thank you, Phil. Karina.
Hi, my name again is Karina, and I am the programs director and the clinical supervisor at IPP. And there are many things that I could talk about, but sort of two parts. One is just really the cornerstone work, which is around the healing of individual trauma and the programs that Phil mentioned, like VOTE, which is the Victim Offender Education Group, or GRIP that Jacques has, and other programs that happen inside of San Quentin. There are so many. Also with the gardening program that Amanda is representing, that really focus on healing individual trauma, on righting unhealthy systems, and fostering compassion, deepening accountability, that not only change and transform individual harm and trauma, but also on a much broader level, change prison culture. So San Quentin is, it's still prison, and it's a panacea within the prison system. And so I think that there's a way in which it's readying men, and we're also at a lot of women's institutions. I don't want to leave women out. So readying men and women to return home. And what we're seeing are that men and women coming home are then leading the charge. So it's not that we're having these movements that are then being led by us here at the table, but they're being led by those who are directly impacted, which is a really important component. So it's an inclusive movement. It's not an exploitative movement. And that feels really something to be at the center of what we're doing, that when we're talking about doing this collaborative work and building a coalition, that centered at that coalition building are people who are formerly incarcerated, that they are also at the table. And also really bridging or straddling these two worlds of what does it mean to be reforming in prison or prisons, which is something that I sometimes struggle with when at my center I am an abolitionist. And how do we get from there to here when we can't negate the fact that there are millions of people who are impacted by the system? So before we get to nothing, we have to address those who are directly impacted. And I feel like these programs are a way of bridging that gap in the interim. Before we get to nothing, this is how we're able to address that bridge. And so we have men and women who are coming home and doing this work when they return home. So many of the participants who have done these programs when they get home are doing work with youth, are doing work in restorative justice, are doing work in social justice, and aren't just doing something that's completely detached, but are really living their purpose and are making direct amends or indirect amends through their work once they've returned home. in their communities, in their families, have done really direct victim offender work with their direct survivors or with their communities at large. I talked really quickly. I don't know that I have other things that I need to add right now. I can save mine to them.
Do you want to briefly mention that we were just talking about before?
Sure. So one of the lived ways that this is showing up is we have a participant who has been home. I'm not exactly sure how long, I would say less than 6 months. And just for his privacy, I won't name him, but went through our program and again, went through numerous programs. I don't want to take credit for just his transformation. And 2 weeks ago, his son was murdered and has been receiving an influx of, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you going to resort to your coping skills and strategies from your pre-incarceration? So his family, his community is really concerned that he's going to go back to drinking and drugging. He is really solid in, that is not who I am anymore. I have done all of this work and this is who I am now. I'm solid. His big struggle and his big challenge is that he's not being seen for who he is now. He's still being seen as who he was then. And I think that that really speaks to the work that he has done and the challenge, one of the challenges of reentry that I hear from a lot of people who have returned home is that I've done all of this work. I'm really anchored in my transformation. And part of the reentry that's a struggle is reentering into my system, my family system, my community system that hasn't necessarily done this deep work that I have. And how do those things now align?
I'm going to stand if you don't mind. So, my name is Jacques Verdun. Started with the Inside Prison Project 21 years ago. We were thinking, what should our mission statement be? And we found out that the department's mission statement for over 30 years had been punishment only. So our mission statement became to change their mission statement. And basically, add rehabilitation to the mission. That happened. We played a role in that, I think. But they spent more money changing the stationery than actually putting in programs. So we had to advocate ourselves and quite successfully did so with a number of legislators. And they were impressed enough to make the department begin to pay for work, not just in San Quentin, but in some of the remote prisons, of which there are many. And so we joined together to bring in those funds and begin working in other prisons. So we're, with the GRIP program right now, we're in 5 prisons, serving 500 men. And I think in the last 5 years, of the first 364 graduates, 81 have been released, and none of them have come back, like none of them. So, doing reentry work is incredibly labor intensive. And so to have something where there's a change of heart that is deep and abiding, and an attitude like you described on this young man, facing the murder of his son, I think it's sort of part of the niche that we have. It's like, it's not circumstance, it's your stance, is one of the things we say. And traditionally, there's been a misunderstanding between people who fund the changing of sentencing laws and the prison reform and the program people. We often get to hear, you're dripping a hot plate. You don't understand. All these people are nice and calm because of your programs, but we need to uproot the system. All that's true in the sense that we do need to change the system, but part of that is working on the inside, going into the trenches, rolling up your sleeves, and actually looking people in the eye that are in this system, and empower them to deal with that predicament. Because it isn't just they got mass incarcerated for nothing. Right? I mean, they did something that often came out of being traumatized themselves, like 99%. And so we discovered a way to describe that in 8 words, which was hurt people, but healed people, heal people. And so I think what's unique to,
Hey, Jacques, speak up.
Oh, yes. What's unique to the VOGUE program, the GRIP program, the Guardian program is the transformative piece, where we understand it isn't just where you are in terms of freedom, this side of the gate or the other side of the gate. It's also who you are. And so to leave prison before you get out is the name of the curriculum we run, so that people are empowered, people that are disenfranchised and mostly minorities that traditionally don't have access to, what the upper white middle class has access to in terms of transformation and psychology and working on yourself. So it's very political to bring that to these people. It's very important for them to feel like I'm not forgotten, and obviously they're very hungry for the material. So, so the innovation grants that have come in from the department, that's a totally new movement, that we have together persuaded the powers that be that, hey, what we do matters. I don't know if any of you saw Oprah on 60 Minutes. I just caught the last part of it, where they're talking about the people in solitary confinement. Like, we have 3 people in my class, and I'm sure you have them in your programs too. One of them has served 26 and a half years in solitary confinement. 2 of them have served 18 years. And when I did the intake, I just wanted to scream. It's like, is this democracy? Is this the sunny state of California? Could this happen? Yes. And these guys were basically sitting against the walls with their backs, freaked out, because there was no transition program. They were told to keep up a diary. So to include men like that and to see them come alive is just an incredible experience. That the human spirit can actually survive that, and for them to be part of a group and socialize within the group is a good example of how political it is to do programs in state prisons, and how important it is for us to collaborate and really grow rehabilitation as a cornerstone part of doing corrections in California, not an afterthought. So that's the task.
And can I editorialize just a little bit to pick up on the innovation grants thing there, that through the advocacy of the folks involved in this transformative prison work group, since 2014, through direct advocacy to the Senate and CDCR, I think it's 25.5 million
over 4 years, stretching 2 more years beyond it, but at least the commitment has been made for $25.5 million.
So that's a drop in the bucket of CDCR's budget. Nevertheless, that 25 some million has been made over this time to, I think it's around 70 different groups providing this kind of work in California state prisons. So on one hand, it's compared to what it was before, it's a pretty big victory. On the other hand, it's infantile, the word, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the investment in rehabilitation. So this is, to me, speaks to the importance of this kind of coalition building to say, okay, that's a start, and take it much, 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 much further so that, rehabilitation truly becomes part of what happens. So, Emiliano, will you close us out here for the first part?
Sure. Well, I was convicted of drinking and driving, and I crashed into another vehicle, and I took the life of an innocent person. I was sentenced to 15 years to life, and when I got to prison, I was ineligible for a lot of the programs because they were offered to people who were short to the house. And then during that time, I just was participating in programs that were run by other inmates. And then from there, I was in and out of lockdowns, served 10 months in a behavior modification unit, and programs disappeared because of the recession. I was transferred out of that institution to another institution, which are both remote in the middle of nowhere. And I was able to participate in a group that Jacques facilitated. And that group was the GRIP program. And it took everything that I learned from all these other groups and it combined them. However, it started them in a way that was so brilliant that it inspired people to participate because we got to own the group in the beginning. And that ownership empowered us to keep ourselves accountable. It empowered us to talk about our pain. And in that group, I was able to come to grips with the trauma that I went through when I was a boy, and that was being sexually abused, and I hid that from people, from everybody, for about 30 years, and I didn't know that event was setting me back, and that event was solely responsible for not speaking up and not talking to people and not speaking my pain and withdrawing from people. I didn't really trust anybody. And when that came out, it came out many times, and slowly that shame started to lose its power. And I began to see, how that was holding me back. I began to see how my pain was articulated in drinking and partying and, not wanting to explain anything to anybody. And when things got rough, I distanced myself and continued to drink. And now I'm in the free world, and it's only because of these programs that I participated in, especially the GRIP program, because I wouldn't have been able to articulate all of this trauma and what led to my offense to be granted parole. So I did 12 and a half years on a 15 to life sentence. And when I was found suitable, the last 30 days, Governor Brown wrote a letter opposing my parole and sent me back to the full board. And that was one of the most difficult 30 days of my life. It was something that I had to accept because I knew and accepted that I committed a horrible crime. However, Jacques and George, my father and my sister, they drove to Sacramento and they got to speak to the parole board. And, they recognized the work that I did in trying to heal myself. And it showed. And I was, by the grace of God, I was paroled. Of the 6 people that had their parole hearings remanded, I was the only one released that day. And it's thanks to the work that I did and the work that has been recognized by Jacques and other people. Now I'm out here and I'm part of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and I've been to Sacramento 7 or 8 times to advocate for policies affecting juvenile justice, such as SB 394 and 395. I got to speak to senators about my experience and my transformation in prison and how many people are in prison and can rejoin society and be a pillar of society who genuinely changed. Jacques asked me to go back into the prison to co-facilitate the GRIP program. And I've been doing that for the past 6 months, which is rewarding and very, and gives me great anxiety sometimes when I go back in, because I'm going back into the prison that I paroled from. But it also brings a lot of people hope, including the prison guards who acknowledge that, you know, that these programs work. They see me in regular clothes and they don't recognize me. Now that they do, it's you know, they greet me just like a normal person. And it's truly amazing.
Thank you. So just to editorialize again, since I'm the moderator, it's so important to recognize that for almost, I think all of the programs, certainly the ones represented today, a really big part of it, as you've seen, is taking the folks who have parole and come back to society and bringing them either back in to work as Emiliano did with folks, or they have folks who haven't paroled yet, who are still within the prison, are many of the facilitators. I think roughly half of your facilitators are folks who are incarcerated. But so it's building leadership within the prison, building leadership on the outside, and then leveraging that, you know, given the different possibilities and opportunities in so many ways. And again, Phil and Emiliano, thank you so much. You are such great examples of what someone can do when they come out with this kind of stuff under the belt. So there's plenty more to talk about, but I wanted to make sure to give space, you know, for questions and answers, discussion here on what you all want to know. If there's anything that can be clarified or expanded upon, or just to discuss. So if there's any questions from the internet coming through Monique, or right here around the table.
No questions yet.
No questions yet.
Emiliano, and maybe the rest of you guys can speak to this too. So I've been to Sacramento with ARC and Cut 50 and the crew a few times, lobbying and worked with a lot of people who are formerly incarcerated in these leadership roles, and they're definitely the most professional, most impressive folks.
And the best dressed.
And the best dressed. It's incredible. I guess ARC is usually the face of that crew in Sacramento. So I wonder if you guys could help me understand the relationship between ARC and like the GRIP program and some of the work you guys are doing, like where you sort of stand apart and where you like fit together. Well, whoever could speak to that, I guess. Emiliano, it sounds like you're working for ARC, but you're facilitating the GRIP program and.
Right. So I co-facilitate the GRIP program. I also, and upon my release, I found ARC, and they, you know, they go hand in hand. I couldn't be effective had I not done the GRIP program. I couldn't speak to legislatures about transformation had I not transformed before I got out. So. I'm sorry, I froze up. I was saying how I couldn't speak to legislators had I not transformed prior to getting out. Yeah. I have been effective in, I believe we're all effective when we go to Sacramento, especially those who have gone through intense training to learn about themselves in a very radical and a very deep way, because it speaks to the legislatures. They have a lot of people have a vision of what an inmate is, a prisoner is, and when you're sitting in front of them, you know, dressed nicely, not in prison garb, they see a human being. They have no idea that this person has been that is formally incarcerated. And when I share my story, they're floored. They have no idea that I used to be a life inmate. They have no idea that I did 12 and a half years in prison. And just that, they're amazed that I can speak to them and I'm not what they thought a prisoner was.
Specifically with regards to ARC.
The collective, the Transformational Prison Collaborative, or the coalition that we're speaking to, started with with the group Inside Out, with Insight Garden Project, and program Insight Prison Project and Center for Counsel, so the 4. And then we invited in multiple other organizations, of which Anti-Recidivism Coalition, or ARC, is one. So we started with that sort of nexus and then expanded to include, I want to say 30? Maybe
Yeah, around 30.
around 30 other organizations. Each of which also included at our initial meeting and a formerly incarcerated representative. So it really blossomed.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
thanks. And I mean, just to connect that dot, you can see, ARC's done a lot of good advocacy work. Part of the opportunity here is to make sure that advocacy work is getting connected up with the advocacy work that these folks have been doing, and just to make it more coherent, stronger, more united.
Yeah, I was gonna say too, as far as it connecting or fitting together, like while I was inside, I met, Scott Budnick and Elizabeth Calvin, Human Rights Watch people, and they all came and they pushed this legislation. And Scott himself, he told me, when 260 passed, that missed me, right? Just by like a year and some change. But he told me, he said, you know what? Don't worry, because we're gonna bump up the age and you'll be out of here. And it's one of those moments where you get hope, and that's what I kind of wanted to put legislation towards, right? Hope is like a really, really important factor when it comes to rehabilitation, because if there's no reason, like when I was in those higher level prisons, there's nothing to do, there's no hope. What are you gonna do a program for, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's one definite way that ARC and other organizations that push for legislation, prison reform, sentencing reform, all those kind of fit together to add that. And then also too, when they talk about not recidivating, I think when we come home and we do have that avenue, like Amelia was talking about, to come out and be advocates more, I think that's also transformative, because advocacy actually was a big piece for me. When I can talk to Scott Budnick and I can talk to all the people that they talk to help push these bills and share my story in that same way, even from inside. That, I mean, advocacy is another, like, hope advocacy. There's like more than that too. But that's definitely one way that I can see that fitting together.
I just wanted to say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is it okay? Yeah, I just wanted to just say one more thing about, kind of connecting the dots on this, and it's just reaffirming what Saurabh had said earlier. Traditionally, the advocacy has really been around legislation that's about incarceration and getting folks out. The Transformative Prison Working Group is really starting to think about support for programs inside. And I think we've been very focused on transformative programs, but there's also arts and corrections, there's college and education programs. And again, just to emphasize the context, the overall budget for the Department of Corrections is $11 billion. Right now, that $25 million that Saurabh mentioned, those are time-limited grants that are all running out by 2019. So when you look at where the priorities are in terms of where the money's spent, it's really been a drop, as Saurabh said, a drop in the bucket to support programs that really have been proven to be healing and transformative.
That's actually a great segue to a question that Melanie sent in from Zoom, which is, she asked, how do you get CDCR to pay for these programs? And that's kind of such a nuanced question, because there's lots of parts to that. Part of what's been amazing about having these programs develop outside CDCR is they're totally autonomous, totally independent, and really good because of it. You know, so I think there's, on one hand, it's like CDCR should be paying for this work because it should be their mission. It's what we all want. On the other hand, there's the danger of co-optation, I think, you know, if something became a CDCR operation. So I'm curious, maybe Jacques and Karina particularly, how do you all see that? I see you nodding there.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah, no, it's a politically very big question, right? We're all pretty happy with our status as being outside the correctional department. At the same time, you know, it isn't right also to exclusively have foundations and donors support something that inherently should be part of the vision of how do you run a prison. So it's on that edge that we've pushed back and say, you know, yes, the end game is to do the reform in departments so that they pay for what they should be paying for. And this is not just for humanitarian reasons. This is the mighty dollar. If you have 81 people out and it costs 75 grand per prisoner to spend a year in prison, so you're sort of saving over $6 million. Right? So it's really time to reform prisons. I mean, we've done everything else. We've done universities, we've done even the army, we have done hospitals, but the institution of prison is still very ancient. And so that's a bit of the force field there. It's like, yeah, we want to keep our status and in that place still push, you know, by being inside, having an informed, firm opinion, push for reform. And that's kind of what's unique about us. It's like, we're in an interesting situation because we're on the inside, so we can't clamor too loud, but we do under the table quite a bit of movement with the advocacy groups. That's a bit of a force field.
And there's a pretty cool Trojan horse factor to this too, in that by standing outside of CDCR but doing amazing work within it, there is culture change, if I understand right, that, you know, wardens who or I don't know about traditionally, but when I first started paying attention to this work, wardens were like part of the biggest obstacle. Like, we don't want programming, we don't want it. Now, if I understand correctly, you're seeing wardens saying, wait a minute, this serves my goals. This makes prison culture better. It makes prison culture safer. It just makes the guards, you know, so it's like you're getting change from unexpected corners, I think. And that's part of the emergent process that's kind of really fascinating to me of like where this will end up. It creates receptivity to change in dark pockets of places you might not expect it. Sorry, I think Emiliano wanted to maybe say something earlier. Did you want to jump in earlier, Emiliano?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention about the about ARC and their importance of how they recognize programs, because they offer a variety of service for post-release individuals to prepare them, you know, to be in the community, you know, to identify struggles and have a place to relate with people that are just like them. So, I mean, out here, they also offer groups and they also offer programming for formerly incarcerated people. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thanks.
Sure.
Was there a question?
Sonia was there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sonia.
I was very curious because I have a friend who runs a nonprofit who refused to get involved with the feeling that there would be some control exercise, that he would not be able to do the work that he wanted to do. And also involved in a group that did funding, who look at some of these smaller groups who need very little money in terms of grants. Look, we've got this money from the government now. Why should we bother giving anything? So I just wondered what your experience has been.
Yeah, no, I read somewhere, if you want change, you got to change the questions you ask, right? So one of the questions we started asking ourselves is, how can we teach, how can we instruct the powers that be so that from the inside out, we're pushing for a change with an earned opinion and walk that line rather than clear out and say, you know, we're too exclusive for you to get your funds. So I can see you make the case either way, but for us, it's important to work from the inside out.
Let me say from a funder perspective, because the same question comes up. It's like, oh, if CDCR is starting to do grants, why do we need to stay involved? And I don't even know how to describe it, but these grants are insane that CDCR is doing. Like, if you wanted to do a case study on how to design grants to destroy nonprofits, like this would be it. In the sense that the grants, I don't even know how to say it succinctly because it's so crazy, which I imagine is like that's how CDCR is from what I understand. But for example, they'll give a grant to expand to a yard in a new prison. But the grant's 1 year only, they can't renew it, and they have to find the funds to sustain that yard after the grant is over. So essentially, these are small grassroots nonprofits that you're artificially inflating their capacity without providing any long-term general support or anything like that. Now, to the great credit of the groups who have done it, they've been very strategic in working around some of these limitations so that the inside hasn't collapsed. But Calliope has been very proud to contribute to keep that going. There's still a need for outside money for sure, and particularly I think CDCR is not going to pay for advocacy. That's the other part of it, especially with regards to this.
Not yet.
Not yet. So
I
please.
just want to add that, so I feel like the CDCR view is shallow and wide as opposed to deep and long. And that's really problematic considering the intensity and the depth of the work that we're doing. And because we are all working on fumes in nonprofit work. And because a lot of these prisons, right, San Quentin is located here in the Bay Area. So many of these prisons in which we're working are, by design, really isolated. Emiliano spoke to being in institutions where there are no programs, there are no services, where institutions are deliberately built and then communities are then created around them. And that's the industry. So where do we get people then to run and implement these programs? We're looking at High Desert, we're looking at Pelican Bay. So that is inherently really problematic. And I would say the other reason to fund these is because one of the tenets of all of these programs that we are speaking to the men and women around is accountability. And so something that I say as a human and as a provider is, what is my accountability to the insane over-incarceration in this country? And my accountability as Karina is that I also am responsible. And so I feel like we are all responsible for how we incarcerate. And so I also have a responsibility to change that.
Yes.
So we've got a question from Zoom here that I'll do my best to paraphrase well, which is around, how do you, I think what it comes down to is how do you quantify or evaluate this work? How do you make the case to people who are interested in more of a clinical take on this around emotional literacy and things like that? How do you describe the impact of this work?
I was listening to Emiliano, but also I read part of that. And,
on your phone?
No, right there.
Oh, there, okay. I was gonna say you're sure.
And I think what that, for me when I was reading it, I caught, because it's kind of cut off there, but I'm looking at what emotional intelligence or emotional literacy can do for society. Does that sound about right too? A part of the question. And for me, right, like I said, I had all those traumas, I had all those issues that I was working with, that I was dealing with, that I had no idea how to articulate them. Emiliano articulated them through his drinking and partying, right, and drugging and everything else. The same here. And for me, now that I have all of this information, now that I have this knowledge, I owe it to society. And we all come out with that same purpose, like I said. But I think that what we can do, I think, and Patty even said in it on Spires, where we do interact with the youth. We used to bring youth inside to the prison, not scare straight, but communicate. That was our motto. And it goes to like, and we sit in the circle with these kids, right? And they'll sit there and I'll tell them a story. And this is the issues that I was dealing with. Does that resonate with you, right? Sometimes we break them down. Sometimes their moms will cry to us talking about, how did you do that? Because, you broke down the kids, and I've taken them to therapy for 2 years, and this is like the biggest breakthrough. So, I mean, that's one way that when we use our stories and our trauma and our healing and this knowledge, it translates to hopefully some more well-adjusted youth. I mean, because that's what I would have needed. I would have needed someone like me to tell me how it is, right? Like, so, or not me, it's not now, when, with the time and whatnot, but just, the guy who's been through it, who's been through prison, to come and say, look, no, what you're feeling is there's something wrong right now. You don't know how to say it, but I'm going to tell you how to say it, right? And that's part of the effects of this transformative work. And I always like to say too, like, what if we had a emotionally intelligent president, So, like, it could translate to great foreign policy. I mean, the effects are limitless as long as you have a society of people who are emotionally well-adjusted, know where their emotions are, what they mean, and how they make them interact in society. I think that's the beginnings of the hope. I know it's gonna sound crazy, but a utopia.
You should run.
Yeah, you should run. What about that question about like impact? How do you quantify and evaluate what you do?
Well,
Want to go on that?
there's the real numbers, some of them that I mentioned here. That stands. But there's also something about being human beings, and going in these places. They're dark places. So we had a group of kids in the class last Friday in San Quentin. They prepared on having written letters to their fathers that they read to the man. So powerful. In the break, I overheard one of the girls that came in say to the other girl, "This is kind of cool, right? It's like having 25 daddies." It's like, cool, right? So there's many different ways, and a lot of it too is, it's this huge system and our scrappy nonprofits, right? And so you learn to do it for the gesture. You do it because at some point you cannot not do it. It's just too inhumane to say, like, I really like how Karina said that. I'm taking responsibility for that. And that's what we're doing.
You got a question?
Thank you all so much. It's just amazing work that you're doing, and it's very soul inspiring to hear your stories and to hear what you've been doing. In a previous life, I ran a foundation that we did a lot of work in domestic violence prevention. And one of the things we found was that domestic violence in these far off communities that are isolated, that have prisons as their primary employer, have off the charts domestic violence problems. So I'm interested in whether you know of, or whether there's, and let me just put the other piece of data on the table, which is that the prison guards in California are the first most powerful union.
Yes.
So it presents an interesting challenge, right? Because as you talk about hurt people hurting, we've got, people in a system that is grinding and degrading for the prisoners and is also grinding and degrading for the guards. And I'm just wondering if you all know of, or are there ways in which the circle work that you're doing can in some way, shape, or form begin to impact that side of the equation?
Yes.
Did you want to introduce yourself, Crystal?
I'm Crystal Haling. I'm the executive director of the Libra Foundation.
I can, yes, is the short answer. And so we've replicated into other states. And one of the states into which we've replicated, Massachusetts, we have a brilliant organizer, executive director there who is in fact doing that. And she is mirroring the circles with incarcerated participants with correctional staff. And so it absolutely can be done. I have had conversations with, at a level 4 institution here with a warden at one of the more progressive wardens at a level 4 institution here in California, because around doing that exact work, because of the power of the union, there are all sorts of barriers around when that can happen, how that can happen. Is it on the clock time? Is it off the clock time? Right, all of these pieces of red tape. I don't think that makes it a no that it can't happen. I feel that that's so key. The same warden would love to have COs facilitate these circles, which brings up a lot of other issues, but feels like that for him feels like one of the keys to true rehabilitation is that he's saying like we as the COs, we as the prison staff should be this is how we should be serving the incarcerated population, is that we should be implementing and providing the rehabilitation. It's a whole can of a lot of stuff to sort through. How would that work? But I think that there are a lot of possibilities when we talk about true reform and really envisioning something that doesn't currently exist, that there's a lot on the table that's possible.
Hasn't Jared started up some
Yeah,
circles? Yeah, so Jared's side from the Center of Council, who's one of the founding groups of the Transformative Prison Work Group, has started doing programming with guards. You want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, Jared came with a proposal where we take a prison in North, Central, and South in California and do a program of resilience for the officers and a rehabilitation program for the inmates. And I brought this up with the secretary at some point. I think we have to evolve our thinking a little bit about it. Everybody goes, yeah, that's a great idea. But how is also important, because just like we're bringing in former prisoners because we all see how powerful that is, they have a bit of a problem with the folks in the Bay Area that have their nonprofits that now come to them, tell them how to be, right? So it's important that we start reaching out to former correctional officers that can help deliver these programs, because it's not going to happen in other ways. So I think there's first some groundwork to be done on finding a team that people will listen to.
And let me just say, bringing it back to the value of the coalition, or the coordination, the hive mind here, all these groups knowing different guards, different people in different prisons, makes it so much easier for a group like that to come together. It's Jared starting something, Karina knows someone in a different prison. It's like, oh my God, you have to talk to that guy. It just accelerates everything. We've already started to see that. I just want to mention really quickly one thing that didn't get mentioned yet about an advocacy success story that I think is important, which is that these grants that we've sort of alluded to, a big chunk of it disappeared from the most recent budget. What was that, in March or something? Yeah. And this group sprang into action, meeting with people. As soon as the news broke, they leapt into action, and between the news of that and whatever the next iteration was, they managed to get $5 million back in the budget for it. So, I'm just thrilled about that as an early stage, the power of a network showing itself. I think, we have like 5 more minutes. Are there any other questions?
So first, I want to just express gratitude to all of you for sharing what you have with us today and all of your amazing work. It's just very deep and profound, so thank you. And Karina and Amanda, you both kind of dispelled this sort of false dichotomy between supporting this deep transformative work inside prisons, and also this end goal of criminal justice reform or criminal justice abolition. And that I think that's something that we as a community of funders could start bridging and breaking down, because I think there has been this sort of, if you want to transform, why are you investing in this work? And you're making the case so brilliantly and clearly that it has to happen both directions. So I really appreciate, you bringing that to the table that clearly. I wanted to, our fund supports work that really affects women and girls, and I wonder if any of you who have programs in women's facilities could speak to the unique challenges, issues, opportunities with women and girls in particular. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. So that's my question.
I can say something, but go first.
Why don't you, to give you an opportunity to speak?
Yeah, just to say, actually, through the CDCR innovation grants, we were able to open in 2 women's prisons for the first time. We're working at Folsom Women's Facility, which is a reentry yard, and also at CCWF Chowchilla. And we're hoping to open our Insight Garden program at CIW in Corona. Oh man, I just don't even know where to start. I mean, CCWF Chowchilla in particular is a prison that's a very, very tough and repressive environment with a set of prison officers, guards there who make things really tough. They do have a new warden there who's going to be going in January, and we have some hope that maybe she will bring some change there. I'm not really sure what to say, except that women, not surprisingly, women have been overlooked in this whole equation. And when I go to CCWF, and I also went there for 2 years with the Vogue program, there's a sense of really being forgotten, deeply, deeply forgotten.
In terms of programming
In
and
terms of
resources.
programming and resources, yeah, and just the level of repression and oppression and sexism and homophobia is really astounding. At Folsom Women's Facility, it's I would say things are more relaxed there. It's a reentry yard, and I'm seeing a lot of programming there, but at CCWF, it's tough. I don't know what you would want to add.
I agree. And the level of trauma that exists is a whole other level. As a woman, when I'm sitting in circle there, the only way I describe it is that it lives in a very different place in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also an experience of going to a women's prison and the sense of isolation that they are so removed from society. So from families, from children, feels much, the impact feels much greater and deeper. So that also, that sense of being forgotten and that impact feels tremendous. So from programming to physical removal is profound.
So we're at 1:20. When we need to wrap up, there were some more questions on Zoom, but I just want to invite open invitation to everyone in the room. If you want to know more about this network, if you want to know more about what Calliope has been doing, will you please contact me? I'm going to leave some cards. Unfortunately, I have a board meeting scheduled at 2, which is crazy, so I have to get back over the bridge. But it's been so great to be here with you all. It's been really wonderful to have Karina and Jacques and Phil and Emiliano. I just want to especially offer my thanks to Phil and Emiliano for bringing your perspective and wisdom today. So again, if you want to connect, if you have any questions about the network, you can certainly direct it to them. Anuja knows a lot about it. Amanda knows a lot about it, and I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone. It's a really great opportunity, and I would love to foment some good work to take this further and deeper. So thanks so much.
Thank you. I know it's Rob, you have to jet,
I
but,
have, you have to stay
but
for the.
do we want to just raise the questions that were raised virtually? I don't know if you have a few more minutes to do that, or
We have to,
have we raised them all, or?
there was just one last question that was here, which is really about bringing it to scale. How do we bring the programming to scale, especially in remote areas? What are the challenges and how to overcome them so that people can benefit from these programs more broadly? That was the last question.
Okay, well, maybe we can take that and then we can close with our guests and then we'll resume our funding space.
I'm just gonna leave a bunch of cards right here. Thanks again. Sorry to run out of everyone.
Thanks.
No, I think it goes to the heart of the matter also because I heard Saurabh revert to the way the government grants are distributed as a reverse Ponzi scheme. Because first of all, none of the work could happen, none of the funds can be spent in the same way. Nor can the funds be spent for creating an infrastructure that is able to replicate. So, we're suckers, right? We want to help, we'll help. That's kind of where we come from. And then we have to realize like, no, we have to do a lot of organizational development, a lot of strategic planning to be able to replicate. But we've doubled our services 3 years in a row. So now we're taking a year to say, we got to catch up. We'll go under if we don't catch up. And so, other than funds, some of these organizations would benefit from people in the business world that have know-how around scaling and strategic planning. And, and I think also there's more work that we can do in sharing strategies because it's very important because you will go under, kind of on your own success, right? You just overdo it. So yeah, it's an important question.
I just wanted to say, one of the things that's been interesting for us, and we have opened in some of those rural and remote areas, is we've been looking into partnerships with colleges and universities in the area and really finding faculty and students who've wanted to come in and support the program. And I know that's something that Jacques does as well, and IPP. So I certainly would not want to promote the model of all volunteers because I think that's very problematic, but we found in local communities there are really great people who want to come into the prisons and do the work.
And that's, kind of opening the gates too, right? Because that's what we want. We want communities to be involved with the prisons.
Right, exactly.
Prisons, that whole thing can be reframed from a place that dumps parolees on your streets to a resource for the community. Bring in these kids that have incarcerated parents, bring in people that have been victimized. It isn't just for the prisoners, it's through the prisoners for the community.
Any last questions, thoughts, observations? So thank you all. Please join me in thanking our great